Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Today we have new amazing stories, so subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Which act of revenge has ever satisfied you the most? I used to work in retail. After the previous manager transferred to another store, we hired an assistant manager. Everyone believed that this young, driven individual who had previously managed sizable stores had the potential to turn around the financial performance of our struggling business. He was highly regarded by the store, regional, and area managers. After a few months of his employment, we saw a few problems with inventories being off. Following several inquiries, these discrepancies were written off as handling errors by me, the department manager. After a few months, the situation had gotten worse. Every week, I could not locate thousands of dollars worth of product that I had personally accounted for weeks earlier, and the company's loss prevention teams took full revenge on every employee in the store. Along with several other employees, I was frequently questioned about how we moved around the store, managed the inventory, and what customers were given in bags. I worked a 9-hour shift on average and handled over 60 transactions and 120 customers. The inquiries were intense. The dock supervisor, who had worked for the company for many years and was around retirement age, quickly became the target of the inspectors. The loss prevention department of the corporation turned his life upside down and questioned him by the police. He began looking into the situation on his own, prying about the other employees, and soon learned some fascinating details about the assistant manager. An almost identical person with the same first name was prosecuted for embezzlement in a different state a few years prior. He began questioning employees he trusted, including myself, about the assistant manager. Things immediately began to fall apart. We had a few strange anecdotes of events involving the assistant manager, but nothing conclusive suggesting that he was wary. Then, when the assistant manager and the missing stock were brought up by a staff member who ran across a previous team member who had unexplainably ceased showing up for work, she instantly cut the conversation. The loss prevention team eventually spoke with the former employee who had been threatened with termination after learning that the assistant manager was attempting to sell part of the missing stock to a friend. This interview came about as a result of pressure from the dock manager. When it came to trial, he was never sentenced to prison because, aside from the direct evidence of his theft, they were unable to establish his involvement in the other missing stock theft, even though everyone knew it was him, and it stopped when he was discovered. It was found that he had a fraudulent identity and had stolen stock from the store over months and months of working there. The courts imposed a hefty fine on him, but he chose not to pay them and vanished shortly after, taking on a new identity. Regretfully, the dock manager quit due to his and his family's mistreatment by the company. Neither he nor any of the other staff members who endured weeks of abuse from loss prevention received an apology from the corporation. After a number of employees had to take medical leave due to stress-related issues that arose during the investigations, we all felt deceived by someone we had trusted for months and that he had escaped punishment other than losing his job. A few months later, during my shift, I received an agitated phone from a different department manager who happened to be on her day off. She was at a toy store in the other town and had managed to spot the former assistant manager. Following a few conversations inside our organization, the entire situation was conveyed over the phone to the loss prevention manager of the toy store company by the loss prevention manager of our company, which is one of the biggest retail chains in Australia. He was fired right away, had his employment with our company looked into, was charged with the same crimes, and I've been told that he was sentenced to prison as a result. I told the previous dock manager what had happened the next time I saw him, and I imagine he smiled the rest of the day. At the time, I had a girlfriend who worked for a boss who was constantly hitting on her. He would purchase stuff for her, flirt with her, and other such behaviors. Our relationship went through a tough point, and he did everything in his ability to win her over and take her away from me. He was a vice president at the company, which meant he had the money and presumably had the ability to negotiate his way out of anything. She would bring him up in fights as a comparison. I finally had enough of it. After being together for 3 years, we decided to end our relationship, and sure enough, they started dating a little over a month later. Despite this, he was aware that the company was forcing her to work overtime without paying her, and when she asked him about it, he told her that there was nothing he could do about it. He was also aware that she was required to take work home with her, which was forbidden because she was a lingerie designer, and he was assisting her in starting her own line, which was a conflict of interest for his company. Rewind a few months to earlier in the year. At the holiday party that her company throws, I get to meet the CEO. I won't reveal his name, but I will say that it was a name that stuck in my head for some reason. Now, I was really angry off. This guy did all in his power to steal my girlfriend away from me. I am aware that it was most likely for the best because any girl who would fall for that hadn't any business being with me in the first place. But at the moment, I'm not considering it in that way. I do not have any moral reservations about exacting revenge, and the time has come to do so. It dawned on me that the email address she used for her organization was a template, first name, last name @company.com. Therefore, I reasoned that the CEO's email address most likely had the same format as mine. It would be a shame not to send a blind email to the CEO of his company with detailed information about how his VP was putting his company in danger by dating his employees, knowingly breaking employment laws, allowing sensitive material to be made public, and starting a competing company. Given all the information I had, it would be a shame not to send the email. So, I proceeded in that manner. I never got a response from the CEO. However, a couple years later, I ran into my ex and had a couple of drinks with her. She related to me how terrible of a lover he was, how often they argued, and how she eventually resorted to hitting him during one of their many arguments. She also shared with me that the issues had their origins in the fact that he was let go from his work. When I questioned her about how that occurred, she said that it was unexpected, but that even he didn't truly know the reason why it occurred. It was a termination of employment of "we're letting you go" variety that was driven by HR. I told her what I did. She was taken aback and upset before storming out of the bar without uttering another word, but I couldn't have cared less. Even the remote possibility that I was the reason why that scumbag got fired and he got my ex-girlfriend who hit him made me feel like $1,000,000. And if I had to do it again, I wouldn't change a thing. What has been your experience with silly complaints from HOAs? My background is in the building and development industries. After the slob tenants were kicked out of the rental home, a friend of mine who owns a rental property asked my crew to perform some remodeling work on the building. The homeowners association did not permit us to rent a dumpster for at least a couple of days, despite the fact that there was a lot of trash, both figuratively and literally, and debris from the construction project that needed to be removed. A complaint was received stating that everything in the backyard must be moved into the house immediately. I told myself, screw that, from now until the garbage truck arrives, it'll be sitting on the curb for 2 days. Sure enough, when I went to check on how the website was doing, a village car pulled up and 2 obese mouth breathers who looked precisely like the kind of individuals you'd suppose had a desire to meddle in the affairs of others stood outside. First thing I do is shut the door, and anyone who wants to talk to me can do so outside. I inquired as to what the issue was. Someone from the community approached me and inquired about my identity as well as what I was up to. I informed him that all of the building that was taking place for this evicted unit did not require any licenses from the village, and there are no evidence demonstrating that this was not the case, such as massive drywall scraps, copper pipe, or conduit. When he asked the homeowners association what was wrong, they told him that he can't put the carnage where the garbage collection is picked up. The first thing the village man says is, okay, well, this is a result of an eviction. I'll need you to show me in the bylaws of the HOA the proper process of dealing with an eviction on a property that is located within the HOA. When the HOA representative found out that their cherished guide had not been broken, their mouths literally dropped to the floor. I told the person from the village to have a nice day, and I told the people from the HOA to get the H out of my way and mind their own business. Throughout the following week, those two would continue to show up and make attempts to enter the building. I had the want to rent a dumpster simply due to the fact that I'm aware that doing so would have gone under their skin. My acquaintance received a notification from his HOA stating that they did not approve of his curtains and that he needed to replace them. This is another example of a terrible HOA story. These are my two experiences with homeowners associations, HOAs, that I don't even live in, and they should all just go F themselves. The previous HOA that I was a part of threatened to sue me over the color of a light bulb that I had installed inside of my apartment. They claimed that the color of a light that was installed inside my unit had an effect on the appearance of the building from the outside. My Philips Hue lights had been functionally normal for well over a year at that point. Then, my neighbor continued to keep their Christmas lights up well after the New Year had passed, and they were called out on it. The next thing I know, someone had a problem with my Philips Hue lights. I painted them in a white color. It was possible for me to prevail in court, but I decided against it because I didn't want to enrage a group of petty bees who had nothing better to do than serve on an HOA board. In any case, the organization intended to add a new amendment that would give them the ability to sue anyone for anything that they considered to be a nuisance. They conducted the question and answer session with the presence of their attorney. I inquired as to whether or not the hue of my neighbor's lights may be regarded as an annoyance, and he specified that it needed to be a more significant problem. In a subsequent question, I inquired as to whether or not we can make a claim that my neighbor had altered the outside aspect of the building. He laughed and dismissively responded no. Therefore, by that moment, their attorney had already recognized that their case was hopeless and that he had stated earlier in the meeting that a significant portion of his duty was to discourage the association from taking a hopeless case to court. From that point forward, the lights would be whichever hue I chose to have them be in my head. My current community does not have a homeowners association, HOA. People throw trash out a couple of days before the city says they can, and nobody says anything. It's amazing. Sometimes a neighbor's grass is a touch high, while another neighbor just constructed a patio in the front yard. Sometimes people put trash out a couple of days before the city says they can. Never lived in one, but worked as a gardener in a good number of them. They are awful. One account in the Homeowners Association is in charge of hiring landscapers for the front yards, while individual homeowners are responsible for the maintenance of their own backyards. The homeowner is a woman in her 70s, and the president of the HOA hired us to trim her backyard after receiving complaints about it. First time I show up, I use a small push mower, and as I leave, I'm met by the president, who just happens to be her neighbor. The little push mower, which he is complaining about, allegedly left wheel marks heading to her property. On her property, which he is now claiming as his own property. Every time I went back after that, he would be waiting for me to finish before beginning to whine about something, and the only reason I was there in the first place was because his nosy was upset that his 70-year-old neighbor couldn't mow her backyard once a week herself. HOAs are a hyper-local form of government and suck even more than a regular government. Oh man, the reason I signed up on Reddit was to share my HOA story years ago. Let's just say this, my HOA was $800. Went up $100 every year since 2015. I bought it at $425 monthly. Next, I got complaints 2 to 3 times a week. Thin walls. Neighbor across the hall upstairs would be dropping weights. My downstairs neighbor would call to complain that it was me. I got fined $500 when I was deployed 7,000 miles away for noise. I sent a video showing I was not at home at the exact time the noise complaint came in. This happened at least 20 times in the few years I lived there. My record was full of complaints of exact times I was either working at the hospital or deployed. Oddly, the noise complaints never came in when I was home. I also had carpet and got complaints about rolling noises. The plumbing was wrecked. The wall next to my condo flooded inside several times. I got called at 3 a.m. to hire a plumber to fix it. $700 later, plumber billed the HOA and not me. It was an HOA problem, but these fools tried to blame me over and over again. They did this to me every 6 months for 5 years. Oddly, that thing kept flooding. They never figured out where it was coming from. I got fined $250 for having a tiny glass bowl in the barbecue area. Not pool, barbecue. No warning, nothing. I appealed it. They called me to sit in on a board meeting. I was explaining and begging the HOA to not fine me $250 for a small bowl. The number of complaints we had against the HOA was amazing. Completely misappropriating funds, abusing their power on the regular. This has reached the highest boiling point. At one point, everybody just got fed up with all this mess. A council was called. The board members refused to leave their positions without a fight. It went to court, and they were forced to leave with a substantial moral compensation for everyone. Some board members even had to sell their property and move out. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.